All right, thank you everyone for joining in this next session of the day. Back with me with another presentation. Today we have Prasad Rao as the Principal Partner Solutions Architect with AWS. And Prasad, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and begin this session.
Thank you, Molly. Hello and welcome all. So I'm Prasad Rao. I'm a Principal Partner Solutions Architect at AWS. I focus mainly on migrating and modernizing Windows workloads onto AWS. In this particular session, we will look into porting a .NET Framework application to .NET 6 using the tool Porting Assistant for .NET. So we will first look into why port applications to .NET 6 and what the tool is. Like we'll do a quick introduction to that. So first 10 minutes would be probably the presentation, and next 30 minutes or so we will be spending time on the demo, which we will take a sample ASP.NET MVC application and port it end-to-end to .NET 6. And then finally, we'll talk a bit about the open source contributions and we'll recap it. Cool. To talk about why we should be moving from .NET Framework to .NET 6 is one of the reason is the Microsoft licensing freedom. Like if you're modernized your code to .NET 6, then you will be able to run it on Linux instances, and you will save more than 30% on the similar instances, right? Of when you are running it on Windows versus Linux. You'll be able to containerize your applications to Linux containers, and you'll be able to deploy using the more mature cloud native tooling. And when it comes to performance improvement, it is like 20 to 30% more performant when you're running .NET on Linux. And you have additional advantage of targeting ARM64 with Graviton EC2 instances. Those who have listened to my previous session, we have talked about it at length about the ARM64. But we'll quickly look again into this particular chart for anyone who is joining new this session. So it's about we have compared multiple series of instances, like whether it is M series or R series or C series. All right, so we have compared a Windows instance versus Linux instance versus Graviton 2. Right, so it's like talking about, if you see the price difference, it's almost, so like if I go to the exact numbers, it is 48.94% savings. Otherwise it's like almost 50% savings when you move from Windows to Linux. When you talk about Graviton 2, it's almost 60% savings when you're moving from Windows to Linux on Graviton 2, which is like ARM64, right? And Graviton 3 process that we have announced in our reInvent last year, it's currently in preview. It offers additional 25% price performance improvement. So you can see, the kind of savings you can achieve by moving your applications away from .NET Framework to .NET Core, or like .NET 5 or .NET 6. In this session, we'll focus more on .NET 6. All right. So, yep. But as we discussed, like the porting is hard. I'll quickly go through this slide for people who are joining new in this session. Even though like .NET Framework and .NET Core have a lot in common, especially in terms of programming languages and many aspects of code development, but porting existing applications from .NET Framework to .NET Core has its own challenges. And for the first problem comes from the fact that many NuGet packages are still not available on both sides. There are many NuGet packages that are exclusively available for .NET Framework, and that makes any .NET Framework application using those packages incompatible with .NET like 6. That leads to another problem, which is difficulty to assess whether an application is compatible for porting into .NET 6, and how much effort is required to make it compatible. And without proper assessment, it is difficult to plan the porting or gauge the timeline required to complete the porting. And even when we start porting, like there is a significant load of manual work that needs to be carried out. Even if we are following the Microsoft's own porting guide to convert to .NET 6, there are a lot of manual changes, like manual steps that you need to go through. You need to create the new projects that are targeting the new runtimes. You have to reestablish all of your cross-project dependencies and reacquire your NuGet packages. And lastly, you got to copy all your code into those projects. And this is where Porting Assistant comes in. It's an open source tool. It is going to scan your code base. It is going to analyze your existing solutions and projects. It will perform a compatibility assessment to make sure that it's going to be able to be ported over to .NET 5. It also finds out, what the cross-project interdependencies are to help you understand where you should focus your efforts first. It will also tell you if you're using any NuGet packages that are incompatible with .NET Core or .NET 5 or .NET 6 runtimes. It supports all three of them. And then lastly, it will also tell you whether or not you're leveraging any API calls in the .NET framework that doesn't exist in the latest versions of .NET. And it will also help you to port your applications to the .NET Core or .NET 5 or .NET 6. As I said, it supports all three versions, and we'll look into it in the demo. And Porting Assistant is available as both as a standalone tool and as a Visual Studio extension. We'll look into both during the demo today. So on the left-hand side, you can see a screenshot from the standalone tool. On the right-hand side, you can see the screenshot from the Visual Studio extension. Right. So what I'd like to point out here is that Porting Assistant is not going to magically port your application. It updates the project files, the CS proj files, updates the packages to the compatible versions, and sure does some code changes too. But still, there will be manual work required to complete the porting. Like it reduces your manual work, and we'll dive deep into what changes are done automatically during the demo by the Porting Assistant. What I want to highlight here is the feature which is Code Translation Assistant that relies on the predefined sets of rules and actions. It finds out patterns in the code and updates the code accordingly. You can find them at the GitHub URL. It identifies common issues such as usage of Entity Framework or ASP.NET MVC and makes changes to the source code to reduce the manual work required for the porting. So just double clicking on what changes it is going to do. If you have a ASP.NET MVC application, then it's going to create the new .NET 5 or .NET 6 compatible project files. It's going to update the namespaces to use Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. It's going to add the boilerplate starting templates like program.cs and startup.cs, archives the files which are no longer used, global SX and bundle configs, and there are other code changes it does, and we will look into a few of them today. And more often than not, you will be interacting with your database within the code, and whether you are using Entity Framework or ADO.NET, based on that, it's going to do some code changes automatically. For example, if you're using Entity Framework, it's going to add NuGet packages for EF Core, updates the namespaces in your code files, and adds the on-configuring method, which will help you connect to your database easily. And if you're using ADO.NET, it's going to add the needed packages and going to add the reference to the .NET 5 compatible package. It also, in some cases, updates your connection strings to the the new app settings file that is used in the .NET Core or like the newer versions of .NET. And as I said, we keep adding features to make it more and more compelling for our customers to migrate different types of legacy .NET applications to the newer versions of .NET. For example, WCF, which was quite prevalent a decade ago, right? It is not supported in .NET Core 3.1 or later, but Core WCF is a community-led effort to port WCF to .NET Core, and Porting Assistant for .NET supports porting WCF apps to Core WCF. Similarly, no support for ASP.NET Web Forms in .NET Core 3.1 or later, and Microsoft recommends ASP.NET Core Blazor instead of Web Forms. And Porting Assistant supports porting from ASP.NET Web Forms to ASP.NET Core Blazor. Cool. And that brings us to using the Porting Assistant. Before we jump into the demo, what will you need in case if you're trying it on your own? If you're using the desktop tool, then you need to install it on your Windows developer machine. And the prerequisites would be So if you say, like if you're porting your target framework is, let's say, .NET 6, then you'll be needing .NET 6. If your target framework is .NET Core 3.1, you'll be needing .NET Core 3.1. Whichever target framework you have, you will be needing that on your system, and you'll be needing your source framework. If you're, let's say, using .NET Framework 4.5 or .NET Framework 4.7, you'll be needing that on your local system. It does supports .NET Framework 3.5 plus, right? And you'll also obviously need the source code, and the tool, as we'll see in the demo, it takes the solution file of the source code of your .NET Framework application. But if you're using the Visual Studio extension, then all you need to do is just install the Visual Studio extension, and you're good to go from there. Right, so let's dive deep into the demo. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat window, and we can take it from there. Let me see if you have any questions right now. No questions right now. That is fine. Let's get into the demo environment then. Okay, so this is the porting assistant tool. You can download it from the homepage, and you can just install it. And this is how the landing page looks like. And you can get started here. For the first time, when you will be, installing it, it'll take you to the settings page, and it'll ask you to add some settings. So these are the settings that you have. So if I click on edit here, it asks you for target framework. As I said, it supports all 3 target frameworks, like the .NET Core 3.1, .NET 5, and .NET 6. So in this session, we'll look into .NET 6. And you need to select your AWS profile. So I do have AWS profile here by default. So I'm going to select that, and you can agree to share your, usage data. It's going to, collect information only on the public NuGet packages, APIs, and build errors to, enhance the tool. And you can always, uncheck or check based on your preferences here. So I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to go to the home page again. Here, when you get started, what I have done here is I've already assessed one of the famous open source e-commerce application, NopCommerce. The latest version of NopCommerce is already probably on .NET 5, but the release 3.8 was on .NET Framework 4.5. So I've used that application to analyze it, right? Assess the solution to show a real life application. But for this particular demo, end to end, we are going to use a demo solution. Let me do one thing. Let me start assessing that file as that particular project, porting assistant demo, and we'll look into what exactly this project does. But let it, oops, not commas. Porting assistant demo, porting assistant solution, open. And I'm going to click on SS here. And if you see this is a bottom line, which is assessing this particular solution. But while it is doing that, let's start looking into the NopCommerce here. We'll start, from the standalone tool, and then we'll switch into the developer, more friendly Visual Studio extension here, right? So starting with NopCommerce here. Even before that, let's look into what information is provided in this whole, the first page. So, okay, the assessment is complete. So let's look into here. For the NopCommerce, total number of projects, we have 35. Out of it, 0 are ported because we have not ported them yet. It has done the analysis. It finds out of 56, there are 52 packages which are incompatible. APIs, 503 APIs incompatible out of 1491. If there are any build errors in your framework application, then it's going to show here. But yeah, these are like all good. Porting actions, and we'll look into it in more detail. 640 porting actions. So that's a more real life application. The demo that we'll be doing today of end-to-end porting will be of porting assistant demo, which has like 3 projects, 10 incompatible packages of 30, and 23 incompatible APIs of 36. And we have 12 porting actions, and we'll be solving those. But let's look into the NopCommerce, and I'll dive deep into it for some time so that you get a feeling of, if you have a real life project, then all you need to do is that, that is one call to action item I sell to everyone who attends some, any of this session, is that if you have a .NET Framework application with you, just download the porting assistant and assess it. I'm not saying to port it, just assess it, and you'll be able to see this information, that how much compatible it is, right? And this is really important when it comes to making a project plan. So in the assessment overview, we see the same information here, right? But then we can dive deep into each of the project levels. So we have these 5 tabs to dive deep into and see information in a different pivoting, right? So the first is the project level. So instead of showing it at the compatible packages and incompatible APIs and all of that at the solution level, we are seeing it at a project level. So we'll be able to understand that, what is the effort that will be required for each of this project. And accordingly, you will be able to create a project plan that, okay, like the timeline view of it, based on the information, assessment information that is provided here, right? And each of this will be having the porting actions. So this will tell you how much effort is required. For example, this particular project, this should not require any porting at all, or this particular project will require only just one effort, right? Or for example, this one, this should take only 2 porting actions. So it should be comparatively easy to do it versus any project which has 169 porting actions, right? And then the other view that we have is on the project references. So if you see here, this shows the whole dependency graph, and it will depend upon your requirements whether you would like to go inside, in, or outside. Inside out or outside in, right? So it's going to tell you the NOP commerce. There are so many projects dependent NOP.core. There are so many projects depend on it, and so on and so forth. So it'll depend upon how you would like to manage your, like the whole modernizing your legacy app. Then we have NuGet packages view, which shows that these are all the NuGet packages that are there, out of which what are incompatible is going to show those. And if they are incompatible, it's going to show you a suggested replacement if it is able to find. That means, for example, Autofac, the current version that is being used is 3.5.2. It is being used in 13 projects. It is being used across 17 source files and 621 APIs, right? And the suggested replacement is this. So if you're going to upgrade that to this particular one, these should become compatible. So it's going to show all that information here at the NuGet package level. Then similar information is shown at an API level. What particular API is there, in which particular package is being used, across how many source files, how many calls are being done, and whether it is compatible or incompatible. So that's the level of information, like a dive deep, that you'll be able to find through this assessment to understand how much compatible your current code is or not. And now we will come to the most important thing, which is source files, giving you a view at a source file level. Like, for example, if I go to, let's say, common controller to see, it says that it has 19 out of 44 incompatible APIs. So let's go into common controller and see what kind of porting actions it does. So it gives you a porting action, says that this particular namespace needs to be updated with ASP.NET Core MVC. Cool. So it is able to identify that, this is one of the porting action. So let's see if we have any more porting actions in this file here. So it says that, like, this is a non-action, it's an incompatible method invocation. It's going to give you all these, informations within your source code, that, exact line numbers where exactly you need to make the change or what is incompatible. And this is where, a developer, like a .NET developer would be looking into here and will be switching to the IDE of their preferred choice, like Visual Studio is most widely used, and they're going to make those changes and come back here and do the assessment to see how much has been fixed and how much not has been fixed, right? And this is where we, we thought having a more developer-friendly view within the Visual Studio itself would be more helpful, and that's why we released a Visual Studio extension for this particular tool, so that the developers need not have to do the back and forth between the standalone and this. Though the standalone gives you a much, a better view in terms of the visualizations, and you can always export this assessment report, and accordingly you can create the plan or automate few things that you would like to do, so on and so forth. So very quickly, let's have a look here at the porting assistant, a demo section of it. It also has 3 projects. Like it has 3 projects. It's a much simpler version. 2 reference projects here, 1 reference project here. Is a compatible APIs for each project level things, so on and so forth. So here, if you see in the common, there are 0 porting actions, and we'll see it while we'll port it. In data access, we have 3 porting actions, and the maximum porting actions we have is in ASP.NET example project, right? And we can always port it from here itself. Like you can select all and port the project from here, or you can just select one of them. If you want to do it one by one, you can always do it like one by one, port the project from here, right? But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to now switch to Visual Studio, and we will use Visual Studio extension for porting assistant to do all the tasks. So cool. If you have any questions, let me check the chat if we have any questions for that. Doesn't seem like. Cool. Okay, so hope the font size is fine. 200%. Yep. So first, I'll let me show the structure of the project. It's a common structure that is generally used by any ASP.NET application. It has a project with the controllers and the views, right? Where you have the controllers and you have the views, and then I have a project called common, which has mainly like your models. There's just one project here with catalog items. It has the models here, right? Then we have data access layer, which is used for your database interaction. So pretty common, like example that you might be using. So it's as an example, is going to use the DB context, and it's just connecting to your database, right? So and if let me show you the project, right? So if you see, this would be written in .NET Framework 4.7, and we are attempting to port it to .NET 6. And if you're going to do it via Visual Studio Extension, you need to have Visual Studio Extension installed. So I'll just show that I already have it installed, but you can always search it from here, Porting Assistant for .NET 2022. I'm using the Visual Studio 2022. If you're using the previous version 2019, you have it for the 2019 also. You can install it on your local. And once you first install it, it'll again ask you for a few settings. So let me go ahead and open the settings to show you that. And it's a similar settings, like you need to select the target framework, whether it is Core or .NET Core 3.1 or 5.0 or 6.0. And then it's regarding the data usage, where you need to select your and select it, and you agree with sharing, or you can always uncheck it. Cool. So that's the context, and let's now start running the assessment here from here itself. So, and there are multiple ways to do it. As I said, from extensions, importing assistant, you have option to run full assessment from here. And I'll talk about this, enable incremental assessment. So when you do the assessment, when you do the porting, right? After porting, if you fix something, when you have this enabled, it is going to run the assessment behind the scenes, and it's going to, update it. So I'll show that in a moment when we will, after assessing, when it will show all the incompatibilities. And the way we display the incompatibilities is different from the way we display it in the standalone tool. All right, so this is a much more developer friendly version. I would say much more Visual Studio friendly version. All right, so other way to is, you can always right click on the solution here, and you'll have the option to run the assessment. If you want to do it at project level, you can always right click at a project, and you can do it at the project level. But what we'll do is that let's run the full assessment with Porting Assistant. It'll take a moment to assess it, but when it will complete assessment, you will be able to see the list in the error list as a warning. So error list is something that is quite common, and all developers used to see what issues there are in the errors and the warning. And once the assessment gets completed, we will see all the incompatibilities here in the warning. So I'll give it a moment to complete. Okay, it has completed, and we can see there are 45 errors. So there are no errors, right? Because obviously the solution is buildable. Okay, I think I should have done one more thing. So let's do one more thing before even starting to port. Let me show the application by running it, what exactly the application does. It's a quite simple application with a bit of a database connectivity. So let me run that and show. So I'm running it on local. As I say, it's a simple. This one is a simple static page, of ASP.NET. And to show the database connectivity, we have added this here cache log, and it has few items created here, and you can edit the price and stuff. So that's a simple application which is coming from database. And if I show you the database here, if I stop it, and for the database, I'm using an in-app database. To keep it simple, I have here app data, and I'm using the in-app database from here. Both MDF and LDF are within the in-app here. This is from where the data is coming, right? So that's a simple application that we have. And I've done the assessment, right? So if after the assessment, I can see here the warnings. And if you see, every warning here has a code, whether it is PA0001 or PA0002. So these are the porting actions. So this will be same as the porting actions that you have seen in the UI. So PA0001 meant there is an issue that this particular is not compatible, and there will be a manual action required to resolve this. PA0002 means that this is something that porting assistant will be able to automatically resolve for you. For example, this one, replace system web MVC namespace with Microsoft ASP.NET MVC core. So if I click here, it's going to take me, okay, not this one. If I click this one, right? So it's going to, so all these will be having these squiggly lines here, right? And yeah, so the porting action, this is something that it will be able to solve it for you, right? Let me see if I can find a better example for this. For example, this one, replace HTTP not found with not found. So HTTP not found, this was used in the older versions. In the new version, it is just not found, right? So this is where if you're going to use it as a PA0002, is going to replace it. And you have an option here, and I'll show you while porting, you have an option that whether you would like to make those automatic changes or not. I would prefer doing it because it reduces your manual work. But if you would like to do it on your own, you can always uncheck that box and do it on your own. But this is what the differences is here between PA0001 and PA0002. So let's do that. Let's port the application. So we have seen the application, we have assessed it, and now we can put it down. Now, as I said, porting can be done on an individual project basis or at the whole solution level basis, right? So I'll right click and I'll port solution to .NET Core with porting assistant. And this is same as if you go here and if you select all and port project from here, but we'll do it in a Visual Studio. Right click, port solution to .NET Core. Okay, how are we doing on the time? 9:26. Cool. Okay. So this is where it asks select checkbox to apply recommended source code changes. So if we are going to check this, then all the PA0002 would be automatically applied. I'm going to check this port, and then we are going to look into the Git changes, what all changes the porting assistant has been able to do on its own, and then we'll look into what manual changes we need to do it to run it on .NET 6. So porting is successful. I'm going to click OK here. And we need to obviously reload all the projects because the projects were initially .NET framework, and now they are .NET 6 projects. Sometimes the load does not happen correctly, so we might have to unload and reload them again. But let's start one by one. We will start with common, right? Because that was the one we did not have any porting actions, right? So if we start looking into here, and I think the best way to look into is Git changes, right? So I'm going to, in the common, if I show you, right, what it has updated the common CSproj file. Okay, we'll double click and see what changes it has done. So on the left hand side, you can see the old .NET Framework style project, and in the new, you can see it's .NET Framework. Target frame is .NET 6. And yes, there are this, this is something that you can always delete it. This is added by porting assistant when they are doing the analysis for its own, but you can delete it and porting assistant will add it again, this commented version of it when it is going to do the assessment. And then what else it has done for the common is that it has removed the file which is not used. It's archived the file. Assembly info.cs is no longer used in the latest versions of .NET, so it has archived it, right? And there's no other change in the commons. If I go to Solution Explorer in the common, I have catalog item.cs, right? But there's no change required in this. So there was zero porting actions required for this. The only change that was required was for the project file, right? So here's the catalog item, and there's no change required here, right? And if I show you the project file here, it's just this part. Cool. Let me close these notifications because yeah, we'll have more space to show data. Cool. And if I build this, so let me build this, only the common part of it. build successful. So now the common has been built for .NET 6. So this is the best case scenario, right? So like this is the easiest one. Like you don't need to do any actions, and porting assistant is going to make the changes on its own. Uh, Now let's like increase the complexity a bit and look into the data access layer where we might have to do some code changes. Again, here, if you see, there's a change here in ASP.NET example context. There is a change on the project file, and packages config file has been archived to back file, right? So let's see this particular file. Okay, but let me show it in the git changes first. I think that will be a better data access proj file. This is a project file that has been changed, right? Again, to .NET 6 instead of the entire .NET framework code. And ASP.NET example context, if I show you this, it has removed system.data.entity and added Microsoft Entity Core, right? That's one porting action that it has done on its own. Other porting actions on its own, it has added, if you see here, the on configuring part of it, right? But still, if I see the file, it has some errors. For example, this it is saying, so that's because mainly we use DB context options right here. So instead of that, I'm going to use DB out functions, and I'm going to use ASP.NET example context here and options. So I'm trying to fix this particular error, and this is where your like a developer knowledge will come into a picture. You will have to have that options. And here, like in the constructor, instead of sending this whole name, we simply send the options. Okay, that fix this error, and let's see if we have any other errors. So okay, other error it is saying is that system data entity DB set. So though it replaced the namespace, we'll have to remove this from here. And DB set entity is anyways now part of entity framework core, for which the namespace has already been added. So it should be fine. Yeah, Microsoft Entity Framework code or DB set, it should be fine here. Cool, no other issues on this. So let's go ahead and build data access layer. If I build this, let's see if it is able to build. Yeah, it also got built. So if you see this, you like, this is like kind of a medium complexity where you had to do some changes. Some changes were automatically done, like adding on configuring, replacing the namespaces, changing this to, like a, a project file. It was able to do. Now let's come to the main project, which has the controllers and the views and the whole starting point page, uploading the pages and everything. So this will, I would say, increasing complexity a bit further. And if you remember from the like here, if you see the number of incompatible packages has the maximum, they have the maximum porting actions that are there, right? So this is the, I would say, requires a lot more effort than the first two projects to change it. And let's start doing that. Now this is where the maximum, like fundamentally the whole concept of .NET from .NET Framework to .NET Core has got changed, right? And and this one seems like is still okay. If this one was not able to load the latest version, so let me unload this project and load it so that it loads the .NET 6 version of it. Yep, it loads the .NET 6 version of it. And how I know this? Because we have dev root here, and so if you see the added files, we have added app settings.json, we have added program.cs, we have added startup.cs. So these are the boilerplate code to get the program running instead of the global SX, which is not required. And so that has been, archived. Right. So let's look into the dependencies. So here, like for the views, we will need a build bundler minifier. So what I'm going to do is that let's look into the dependencies in the packages. We only have Entity Framework core, which also seems to be the old version. So I'm going to manage dependencies and add dependencies that are required. So in the installed, first of all, what I'll do is I'm going to move it to the latest version if we have. Yes, so we do have a latest version. So I'm going to update to the latest version. Okay, so here, if you see this, like when I said, right, when we were talking about enable incremental assessments with porting assistant, this is what I meant, that once after the porting is done and we are doing the code changes, it is going to automatically keep assessing it behind the scenes, and it's going to update. So instead of 45 warnings that were there initially, then 42, and now we have 35 warnings, right? Cool. So this is done, updated. So now I would like to have build bundle minifier. That is what will be to look into. Nope, not this one. Build bundler minifier. Finally, I have the one which I'll need. Cool. Install, and then I'll also need. So we do have Microsoft ND framework core, but I will, if I go to the installed version, I have NT framework core, but because we are interacting with SQL Server, we'll need Microsoft NT framework core.sql server. So let me go ahead and add that also. Entity core dot. I think it came up. Yep. So I'm going to install this. So with this, we should be having the packages that are required. Okay. So if I look into the ASP.NET project code, we have build bundler multiplier, framework core, and SQL Server. And yeah, they have project references of common and data access. Okay. So next, what I'm going to do is that, yeah, I'm going to add a couple of files, which are mainly, the full rendering thing, which is libman.json. So let me, I already have those files. I'm going to add those files, and so I have bundle config.json, libman.json. And the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to restore my client-side library. So this is all, how you're rendering the .NET 6 world. So I'm going to restore client-side libraries. So restore operation completed. And we know that, in www root, we do have, the CSS fonts and images in the latest version. This is where a bit of your, your knowledge about the older versions and newer versions will come into picture. And I'm going to move these to www root. And okay, and then I'm going to apply item, so I'll replace the existing files for that. So with that part handled, now let's look into the controller. We can start with the controller, and then probably we'll move on to the startup. So in the controller, if I go to catalog controller item, so we have just 5 warnings now. So let's try and fix those. Before that, let me see if we have any questions. And I see we have around 10 minutes, right? So no questions. Cool. Okay. So now let's look into this particular file if we have any errors here in the catalog controller, right? I can see there is one error here. So if you remember the porting action, this was HTTP not found. And because we checked that box, it automatically converted to not found, right? But this is another error which I can see, which is for the bad request. Instead of new HTTP status code result, we have in the latest version, it's more about status code only, and we need to cast it to end, and that should fix this particular error. Yep, that fixes error. And I have it in a couple of more places in this particular file. So bad request, let's see where exactly it is there. So this bad request is here. And you see even here, the not HTTP not found has been replaced with not found. And I think it should be having one more place, the bad request. Yep. So I'm going to fix this too. Okay, so that part is done. So we are good with this particular controller. Now let's talk about the program.cs and startup.cs. This is a boilerplate code to start, and this is mainly from the .NET 5. .NET 6 has merged both program.cs and startup.cs into one, but even this works with .NET 6. So it's going to host a builder and it's going to create the startup. So I'm going to go to the startup, and here this is where the major change would be required. So if you see, it has been added by CTA, which I talked about, Code Translation Assistant. Please add the corresponding references, and if certs are not provided for deployment communication, will be on HTTP, which is fine. We do not need HTTPS for this, demo. Please remove HTTPS section of the Kestrel config in the app settings JSON, and also remove the middleware component using app.use HTTPS redirection. So it has given you some hints about what changes you will need to do here if you're, not using HTTPS. I'm going to, if you're using HTTPS, obviously you'll have to, add the certificates. I'm going to remove it. And to keep it simple, instead of, this telemetry and application insights is not required for the demo. So I'm going to comment, or otherwise you'll have to add those references, but I'll keep it simple here for now. Okay, apart from that, what is required here, we will have to have add the DB context for using SQL Server, right? So let me, so here in the startup class, we have configure services and configure, right? So if you see the configure services, we are adding the controllers view, but we also need to add the DB context to run with the SQL Server. So I'm going to add this line, which takes the connection string, and then it uses the ASP.NET sample and adds the DB context here. Okay, it's running on SQL Server mainly because it will probably need a namespace. So let's fix that here. So we already have added this, NuGet package, microservice core. So I'm going to, and it's going to add the namespace here. If I'm not wrong, yeah, it's added the namespace. Cool. So even this file seems to be good, right? Okay, so let's go back to the controller and see if we have any other. I remember there was one other issue in the controller. Okay, and that is here. Instead of, because the DB context is coming from the configure services, we need to add the via dependency injection. So let's do that. Let's add it via dependency injection, right? Okay, I'm going to just copy paste this. And that should fix this. So now, as we have added in the configure services DB context, it will be able to come in here, and then you'll be able to do the DB interactions from here. Okay, so this part is also good. Now let's fix the errors that are for the views, and we'll start with layout.cshtml. And I have done this a couple of times, so I know where exactly the errors are, but you can always browse through these warnings, and when you'll build it, you'll get the errors. You can always do that via this. For example, your styles and scripts, it is showing errors here, right? And this is mainly because they have realized that all these tags are just going to simply emit boilerplate HTML, and that's why that change has been done in ASP.NET Core, that instead of having these script, we are going to add that boilerplate code directly here, for the HTML. So I'm going to replace this with the lines which are there. So it's the style sheets for main HTML and the modernizer main.js. All right, and let's see if we have. I can see a few more errors here in the script. So let's fix those two. So as you can see, instead of jQuery and Bootstrap, I'm going to replace them with their JS files instead of the script. These are the JS files that already are there. So that's the first fix. And then we have similar errors here in the create and edit HTML. So let me fix that also very quickly. So instead of jQuery val, we are going to use this JS, an obtrusive one, and then in I don't know, it's in the edit CS file. As I said, I've done this before, so I know. Otherwise, when you will build them, you'll be able to see these errors, and then you'll be accordingly able to replace them with the right, like code snippets. Cool. So these are the manual changes that are done for rendering the view. So we have fixed the controller part. We have fixed the views part. Now let's talk about the database part, right? So as I said, database here is in the app data, the MDF file, and we are obviously, because it is in app data, we'll have to copy the database to the folder. So I'm going to do that, both MDF and LDF, and let's see what the connection string is. So for that, as I said, app settings.json, this has been added by the porting assistant, but obviously you'll have to review it to see if everything is fine. So it had added two connection strings. One is local server, in case if you're having the database on the local server. I am not, so I'm going to comment this out. I'm having it as a local DB. Yes, I do have it as a local DB, and let's see if this is going fine. Attached DB file name, I have directory, ASP.NET example context, and this is the database. Okay, the only issue I see here is that my database is within the app data of the data directory. So I'm going to add the app data here to make the path correct. Okay, cool. So this is fixed. Now let's look into the rest of the strings. Okay, if you remember the start of CSS, if you're not using HTTPS, then you can remove this. So I'm going to remove this part. Okay, so it will run HTTP. Port 80 is generally occupied, so I'm going to use some other port. I'm going to use port 8081 here, so that it's able to run it here. And that's pretty much. I think we are done. So if I build the solution, it should be able to build the solution. Yeah, the solution is built. So let me make ASP.NET example as a startup project, and let's try to run this project. Now, if it runs, it will be on a .NET 6. So start a project. Okay, it's asking whether you would like to trust SQL SSL certificate. I'm going to say yes. Yes, though we are using HTTP, so it should not matter for us. Okay, this seems to be running. So what we'll do is that we are going to let's hit localhost 8081 and see if we're able to do it. So 3 previous versions. I'm going to do it localhost 8081 and see if it works. Yep, it works. Right. So now this particular application is running on .NET 6. Let's see if it's able to connect to database correctly. Yep, it's able to connect to database. So yeah, that's pretty much right. So we have done the whole porting. We have seen using porting assistant via the standalone tool and how it helps you assessment and create a plan, and you can always port it from here. But for a more developer friendly, we have Visual Studio extension. So within the Visual Studio extension, when you're actually coding, you can do it from here and you can port it. And on top of that, I would like to emphasize again that there will be manual actions that are required. So .NET developer expertise would be required, but it's going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to update your required namespaces, the CS project files, and so on and so forth. So let's go back to the presentation and recap it. So recap, as I said, like .NET Core, .NET 5, .NET 6 is the future, right? So it's the open source cloud platform, lightweight and performant, and like it helps you use the cloud native tooling if you're able to port your application to the newer version of .NET. But it is challenging, it is time consuming, and it requires expertise. And we do have a tool to make your life easier, which is going to eliminate a lot of your manual steps. And you can use the assessment to guide the rest of the porting process. You can download and install the porting assistant from here. And in terms of contribution, I know like porting assistant, as I said, is an open source tool, so it's all available on GitHub. The analyzer part of it, the client part of it, and even the data store part of it, from which it like it does the entire like suggestions part. And feel free to like have a look, contribute. We welcome the like any contributions from the community. In case if you have any support, in case if you're running any issues while using the tool, you can always contact me, connect with me on the LinkedIn, or contact me. More than happy to help. Or we have an official support email, AWS Porting Assistant Support at amazon.com. Thank you very much. Let's look into any questions if we have.